Hello, welcome back. Beefy Boys episode 142. You might have already noticed. If you haven't, you wouldn't have seen the first 141. Dom's not with us today. That is actually a celebration. Happy third anniversary here to Dom and his wife. Going back out to Tahoe, I'm supposing to pretty much enjoy the place where they got married originally. Return to the scene of the crime, as I believe he put it on his Facebook. So, shout out to you, Dom. Here's a cheers. I got a rosé ale, if that would balance in. I figured that might be the most fitting cheers, considering it is a beer and yet still a rosé. Now, that being said, we do have a UFC fight card to break down here. So I thought I might go a little different direction with it. This week, being that I'll just run through the whole card, I'll kind of take the Chael, the Brendan, not Ariel, because he definitely has a lot of guests, and the other guys have co-hosts. So, with those two being the guys that kind of just run their own shows, requires kind of a different pace, kind of a different focus. I think more of a personal effect to it. And I think that leads us into the first fight pretty great, actually. That being said, first fight of the night, and I will give you guys some odds here. These are all going to be via Caesars at time of fight. I believe UFC is going to give DraftKings in cage, so sorry about it. Sorry I have a Vegas book. I don't know what to tell you. No ads here, and I wouldn't honestly want a gambling ad. I don't know if you've heard the reads for the hotlines you have to call. Every state has a different hotline, and if your podcast goes to that state, you have to tell that state what hotline they have to call. It's a lot. Anyway, back to the point. Juliana Miller fighting Luana Santos. Personal effect being that Juliana Miller used to be in Oklahoma, now trains out of California, I do believe it is. San Jose, somewhere in Northern Cal, if I do recall, or San Diego. Southern Cal, who knows? California. Anyway, point being, came into the UFC from Tough, had 4-1 record, coming off an L here, and Dominic and I had both said we didn't think she belonged in the UFC, deserved to be in the UFC. Meanwhile, you have Luana Santos, who, no knock against her, but it's not like she's out here just considered in our head as world beater, girl that you can't miss. And I think Vegas here kind of took both sides of that coin. Luana Santos minus 160, Juliana Miller plus 135. This is via Caesars, as I said. DraftKings had a little closer. That being said, Juliana Miller has a chin, and that's not the compliment I need to be leading off with if you were going to be in a position to win a fight. I don't think. I think I might lead off with maybe, even if it was a one shot, like the Leon Edwards fight, for instance. I might lead off with, well, he's got a nice head kick. It doesn't give away the actual result, but it does tell you a big clue about what's about to happen. Now, that being said, Miller gets stopped. I believe it is second round. Let's confirm that. Oh, God. First round, 3 minutes, 41 seconds. I gave her too much credit here. A lot of first round finishes, I believe, this week as well. That ended up happening on the UFC London card as well. Not this last one, but the one before. Anyway, point not here nor there. Luana Santos looks good. I mean, just lit Juliana Miller's face on fire with strikes for 3 minutes and 41 seconds. And honestly, I think the fight could have been stopped sooner. I remember Miller was eating a lot of extra shots. Definitely was going to be a 10-8. If she somehow survived another minute 20, could have been a 10-7. I mean, that's the kind of damage we're talking about that she was eating. That's why I let off with her chin is strong. Now, that being said, not big names, right? And that's why I lead off the card, and that's why I'm going to keep it pushing here. I'm not going deep dive on each one of these people this week. I don't have Dominic to do it with. And honestly, I think you guys hearing me rant and not switch up the pace is just going to put everyone out. So, we'll keep it moving. Another first round finish. Oddly enough, 6 seconds longer of a fight than the first fight, so 3 minutes 47 seconds here. We have Damon Blackshear taking on Jose Johnson. The odds here are going to be Damon Blackshear minus 270, Jose Johnson plus 220. By the way, I did not put any bets on these cards. Prelims in Maine, that, I know it's one fight card, but you understand what I mean by saying cards. Don't call me out. Now that being said, I didn't see a lot of value this week. I liked the favorites for the most part. Didn't see a lot of dogs that I was really flying towards, with the exception of Santos. Now that's shout out to D-Mac, because originally I had said I have this weird feeling that I like Miller just because she's from Oklahoma, and he said, remind me of our last podcast where we agreed that she did not deserve to be in the UFC. So it was on Santos, I guess, as a dog, but plus, or was she even? She was the favorite, so makes sense. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Same with Blackshear, minus 270. Now Blackshear did get it done a different way. Still looked good on the feet, I thought, but between him and Jose Johnson, it was a much more close fight on the feet. Once Damon Blackshear was able to get the takedown, I can't remember if he went from front headlock to half guard. It was a nice transition, but however he got into it, he ended up getting into a twister position, which essentially is, if you can imagine it, your lower body, your two legs are on, let's say, their left hip, holding their left leg. They're intertwined around it. And then your body is snaked out to their right side, and you get your arms locked around their left side of their neck, so you have their right arm and their head, and then you crank and twist your legs away from yourself, essentially using their spine as the divider to pull their hip down and left and their head and shoulder down and right, almost like wishboning their body in a sort of way. It's a lot of people say it's a submission of pain, where there's only been 3 in the UFC, and that's why I'm talking about it like that. Why I'm trying to describe it. It is rare. And the reason I'm describing it like that is because you realize it's not a choke. I don't think someone can break your hip doing it. I don't know that someone's strong enough. Interesting question, I suppose. And maybe for those 3 guys, maybe those guys were strong enough, and that's where they tapped. I'm not sure. One of 3. It is to be talked about. Definitely has to be up for sub of the year. I think there might be better ones. I will say that. Because, like I said, Twister is kind of like a submission of fortitude, not necessarily oxygen or joint manipulation. So, yeah. With that being said, we can keep it pushing to Jacqueline Amorim and Montserrat Conejo Ruiz. What a name. Montserrat Ruiz plus 205. Jacqueline Amorim minus 250. This fight was a dog walking. I don't know how Montserrat Conejo didn't get finished earlier, to be honest. I mean, she was getting out. I mean, she got out significant strikes, 86-6. 86-6. She had one takedown and honestly 3 minutes and 40 seconds of control. So wasn't even like she fought. Oh yeah, she fought a bad fight. I don't know what I'm gonna say, because that being said, Amorim had 8 minutes of control, 1 takedown, 4 submission attempts, and 141 total strikes landed to Montserrat Conejo's 20 total strikes. I scored both the first and second round at 10-8, and so did all 3 judges. This fight was 20-16 going into the third round. This fight was 20-16 going into the third round. And then finally, Amarim gets Ruiz out with some punches. Just, I mean, shout out to Ruiz for taking that much damage. It was more of an accumulation knockout, if you ask me. I mean, granted, Amarim landed some heavy strikes there to set up the ground and pound finish. But I will keep it pushing, as I promised you. We have Martin Buday versus Josh Parisian. This is one where Parisian has had 2 opponents in a row pull out. I feel terrible for him. This is a fight where I think he's plus 180. Buday is minus 220. But I think it was still winnable for Parisian, honestly. I think that he's on the edge of being out of the UFC. And I think this was a winnable fight, albeit a hard fight to win. And stylistically, Buday is a lot more powerful. And I think, as far as on the feet, Buday was a little better than Parisian. And that was kind of where Parisian had hoped to be better, because Buday is the better grappler for sure as well. You could argue that perhaps pure jiu-jitsu, Parisian could hold a candle to Buday, but Buday has good wrestling. So I like that combination. I always will, especially at heavyweight. I mean, if you can wrestle at heavyweight, that's already a whole different kind of beast, just being able to do it at that size. That being said, Buday ends up getting the takedown after a lot of nice work on the feet. I don't want to discredit. I mean, he outstruck him 42-26 on the feet. Significant strike. I don't want to discredit Buday's work, because he landed 20 ground strikes after that and had 2 minutes of control. But essentially, I mean, the Kimura only comes because Parisian reverses the position momentarily, and then Buday gets a pretty sweet Kimura, gets back over, is cranking on it. Parisian, I mean, he taps, of course, but he held on a little longer than I even thought he needed to. I mean, man, when a Kimura isn't that deep, I mean, you're talking about a potential spiral fracture to your humerus. I mean, is that worth it? Is that worth it? Can't be. Can't be. That being said, I do think Parisian gets cut. That's tough. That is super tough. He has the win against Alan Baudot, but losses to Jamal Pogues, Dontel Mays, and now Buday. And split decision win against Roque Martinez. So 2-3 in his last 5. Could maybe make a case for a 2-fight deal, I suppose, if his deal was to be up, let's just say hypothetically. But I think Hal heavyweight is pretty shallow as well. That is probably his saving grace here, is that the shallow depths, as I should say, they're not very depthy, are what are keeping Josh Parisian alive there. Also, Martin Buday, 1 loss in his career. Just a boring fighter, honestly. And I mean, he got a finish. First round. I'm saying he's boring, though. And that's hard to do. But it's just something about his personality and character. His fight style is actually pretty fun. But you just never remember him. He doesn't stand out in a crowd. Kind of like your thumb. And I don't mean he looks like a thumb, though he does. I just mean that, yeah, I mean, there it is. But it's always doing really good. I just forgot. That's just hard worker. Just a blue-collar lunch pail guy. Because the personality is lacking to be otherwise. We'll keep it pushing. We have a lot of fights on this card. That is another thing I'm going to address here at the break of the prelims to main card. I want to go on a little pre-main card rant. But before we do that, we still have 3 more fights. 3 more fights. You heard that. 3 more fights. Not the most fights we've had in the prelims. 7. But 7, you know. Granted, like I said, a lot of first round finishes. That saved the rant from happening at the start of this. Now that being said, next up we got a featherweight fight between Francis the Fire Marshall, minus 130 against Isaac Dulgarian, who's plus 110, who sounds like he should be in Game of Thrones. Dulgarian, Targaryen. We won't take the last 5 letters of the name and make a joke about it. That would be horrible to do on YouTube, where they don't like fun. Now, that being said, this fight was, pure dominance. Dulgarian came out, got the takedown, and essentially grounded and pounded Marshall till he just couldn't handle it. And it was heavy ground and pound, too. It was brutal. And eventually, Dulgarian starts throwing elbows while Marshall's just already beaten, laying on the mats, the canvas, and just delivers a couple stinging blows that pretty much iced the fight for him, man. And I think Isaac Dulgarian is a guy I want to spend a little minute to talk about here. I really liked his performance. He did not fight in Dana White's Contender Series. He did not fight in The Ultimate Fighter. He last fought February 6th, 2022, of Fighting Alliance Championship. I don't even know where that is. What is that? Who knows? He had 5 wins before this, all finishes, 3 TKOs, 2 submissions, all first round. Even better than that, all faster than 3 minutes. So he was definitely a problem for guys in FAC. He also fights out of Factory X. So, a lot of other Factory X fighters here in the UFC. Great chance his coaches put out a word for him like, hey, we got a guy. UFC loves to hear that. We'll put him up on, before he's ready. Another cool fact about Dulgarian, birthday is 4th of July. So he probably goes pretty hard on 4th of July International Fight Week. Good for him. That's tight. He's only 27 years old. 6-0 after this fight. So this is a guy that Francis Marshall had, I think, the hype coming in and was kind of starting to lose his star. And this was the UFC the UFC genius marketing, right? Marketing genius. And by that, I mean that they set this kid up to, 5 first-round finishes, dangerous in different ways, 2 submissions, different submissions, 3 KO TKOs, so just, different power, dangerous power. And then Marshall coming off a loss where kind of got exposed a little bit against Gomez. Split decision that I scored for Gomez. And I remember thinking that we had bet on Marshall, but if Gomez had won, it would have been a slight robbery. So, if Marshall had won, we bet on Marshall, and had he won, it would have been not our favorite. Now, that being said, does still have the win over Marcelo Rojo, so at least does still have that victory in the UFC, does have the Contender Series win. So, for our intents and purposes, we'll call him 2-2 in the UFC. Probably gets one more fight, but it's going to be a toughie, and I think it's going to be like career contract on the line. Quite the opposite for Dulgarian. He probably had one more fight on his deal original too, unless they really believed and had seen him in maybe a 4 fight. But either way, that kid's going to get a lot of shine, deservedly so. I thought he had vicious power, savage ground and pound, and honestly pretty good wrestling, because Marshall's a good wrestler as well, so I respected the ability to get the takedown the way he did. Now, let's keep it pushing. We'll go to Terrence McKinney, a Beefy Boy favorite. We all know and love him around here, versus Mike Breeden. Terrence McKinney minus 290, Mike Breeden plus 235. Dominic and I talked about it. This was Vegas for some reason selling on on Terrence McKinney, and man, let me tell you, that made no sense at all. No sense at all. I haven't seen Mike Breeden really do it quite anything at all impressive. He's 10-5 coming into this fight. Let's check his profile here. 10-5 coming into the fight. Fights out of Marathon MMA. Is 34 years old. Has losses to Fluffy Hernandez and Natan Levy. And I mean, before that was 10-3. It's impressive that he even got into the UFC. Dominic and I are convinced that Vegas was just couldn't figure out what they saw, why they liked anything of Breeden. And I know he wasn't the favorite, but what I'm saying is Terrence McKinney should have been minus 350, minus 400. Shouldn't even have been a question. And as happens to be, he outstrikes Breeden, and is just beating him up, man. I mean, beating him up to the point where he gets the stoppage in 1 minute 25 seconds, and he's just beating him up. It wasn't close. I mean, what are the stats here? Breeden landed one punch or a kick to the body. A single kick. Tried a takedown. Didn't get it. Now, to his credit, defended 2 takedowns. That's his best stat in this fight. Minute 25 seconds. Defended 2 takedowns. Best stat. Because his striking defense was under 40%. So Mike Breeden's got to work on that. He's got to get back in the lab. And granted, at 34, 10-6, salty record, 3 losses in the UFC. That's a roster watch name, 100%. On the other side, Terrence McKinney, 14-6 now, came in 13-6. 13-6 sounds a little salty, but you got to think about who Terrence McKinney fights, how often he fights. I mean, this guy's already had 3 fights this year. He's going to probably have another one. He's going to have 4 fights this year. I believe he had 2 in 2022 and then 2 or 3 the year before that. So, and these are all UFC fights, so he's stacking fights. I mean, you're talking about Bonfim, Sajakov, Dober. Like, you're talking about, and this is almost a year and a half. And then, I mean, Faraz Zion, Matt Frivola, has a Sean Woodson loss, though he's fought him. Has a Derek Minner loss, though he's fought him. Has a Luis Gavino win. I think the Gavino win is what showed the UFC they wanted him. Now, he is 1-3 coming into this Breeden fight, so it is almost like the UFC was trying to kind of give him a, hey, here's a pick-me-up. And if you remember how the Sajakov fight went, it was going well till it wasn't. So, this was the UFC, I think, just being cool. Just, hey, man, be cool. And I think that's what happened here. So good to see it. Like Terrence McKinney moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, I have 2 beers open now. It's a wild style kind of a day. We will go to JP Bays, even though it's spelled like buys, at bantamweight, fighting Marcus McGee, who Marcus McGee, Dominic and I talked about, looks like he's 55 years old, but in fact is only, 33. So, not the youngest, but to look as old as he looks, it is pretty unbelievable. Now, Marcus McGee, minus 350 favorite. JP Bays, plus 275 dog. JP Bays, 9-5 coming into this fight. JP Bays lost his last 3 fights coming into this fight. I am not a JP Bays fan. I know the Cheyenne Bays, JP Bays stories that have come out, the Sharks, all that stuff. I think Dana just has a soft spot for this guy because he also has a gambling problem. He's been helping this guy out. And you know who didn't help him out? Marcus fucking McGee did not help this man out. He one shot, oh, the most stingingest, rightest piss missile down the fucking center line. Holy shit, did he crack this man up? It was insane. That being said, Bays threw a lot. Threw 30 strikes. Landed 4 of them. Marcus McGee threw 13. Landed 7, but really only needed to land the 1. And that's what I'm saying. It was a literal right hand just piss missile. JP Bays, goodbye, good night. We'll see you later. Marcus McGee still stock up, still climbing. Marcus McGee is going to be like a fun, he's going to be a Bobby Green type. That late surge, should have been here a little sooner. It was hidden on the low circuit because he's got a weird personality and appearance. But I think the UFC should learn, if anything, like from Bobby Green. It's a good marketing tactic. All right, and that brings us to the end of the prelims. And now let me just go on a little rant here about our 6-fight main card, right? So that'll give us 13 fights on this fight night. Hey, UFC. We don't need 13 fights in the fight night. I don't know if that's a hot take. Call it a fucking hot take. But you don't give us women's featherweight fights. You don't sign girls to that part of the roster. Instead, you have like 64 lightweights signed at the men's division. I mean, you flooded your roster with plenty of people you don't need. If anything, you should filter them into the Contender Series League. And then have Contender Series champions. Not even no, there shouldn't be Contender Series champions. It should just be win 3 in a row in the Contender Series and boom, punch your ticket up to the automatic UFC 4-fight contract. Like you've at least proven something into the like UFC. Almost like soccer with like relegation, and you know if you lose so many in the regular UFC beyond a certain rank, obviously if you're champion and you lose your belt, lose your rematch, lose to the number 2 person, lose to the number 5 person. I'm not going to say that after that streak you deserve to be cut. I would be an idiot to say that. So, it's all situational. But, I mean, there could be a separation. There's too many fights, UFC. It's too many. And this had plenty of first-round finishes. And I watch all the fights, so it's not a big deal. It's just, it's too many. There's so much between each fight. All the pomp and circumstance. Commercials. I mean, we really don't get it with the 13-fight card, and I get that you're eliminating all of that stuff. But I guess what I'm asking is, can we make the pay-per-view cards 15-fight cards? With a 5-fight early prelims? Because at least those fighters get to have the name value of being on that card in a big city, getting that experience of the walk. Can we make fight nights 12 fights or less? I think that's reasonable. I think a fight night limit of 12, and I think a pay-per-view limit of 15. I think that's fine. And I think if you want to bill them out 16 and 13, maybe not 16, but 15 and 13, bill them at 13. But I can't imagine a card where all the fights go through. And this one had a guy pull out in Lando Venata, I do believe. And we could have just scratched that fight. And it's not fair to the other fight. Just pay him. Just pay him. You're still gonna have the event. Just pay him. Just don't pay the guy that got hurt. I guess pay him for his camp, you know? Pay the other guy a show he made his weight. Pay the other guy for his camp. Scratch it. I don't know. It's too much. It's a lot. It's not my favorite. All right, let's keep it pushing here. I think the real way to go about this main card here is not even necessarily breaking down my scoring of these fights here. AJ Dobson and Chukwi had a good fight. Rounds 1 and 2 were back and forth. You could say they split him. I think judges did think they split him. Thought Dobson won the third and really showed a lot of heart. Looked good for a guy that's newer in the UFC. And Chukwi falls to 6 and 4. That's a salty record. That is the problem with getting guys so young and putting them on your main stage, is they get salty records. Speaking of salty records, Jamie Pickett was taking on Josh Fremd in the fight kicking off the main card, which I just rolled right through, so sorry about that, Josh Fremd. I think the reason that happened is because I didn't care about this fight, and Josh Fremd just held him on the cage, it seemed like, for almost the whole fight. So, for me, I mean, yeah, he landed 31 total significant strikes and Jamie Pickett landed 14 in a 15-minute fight. I mean, this fight was snooze city. Every judge scored every round for Fremd, and so did I. Surprise, surprise. Just a terrible fight. Just a terrible fight. I do see here that one judge scored second round for Dobson and the first round for Nchukwi. That was Saul D'Amato. I think he just got his card mixed up. Honestly, guys, crazy for that. But yeah, those first two fights, not my favorites. I'll be honest. Not my favorites. Now, that being said, we get to the third fight. Poliana Viana, Yasmin Lucindo. We know what we're talking about, boys. We know what we're talking about, right? Poliana getting almost robbed and defending herself. Of course, what we're talking about. I don't know what else she thought I could have been talking about. Now, that being said, she did not get quote-unquote robbed in this fight. You could argue that she won the first round. I scored it to Lucindo. And the only reason I say you could argue it to Viana was because Adelaide Bird scored it to Viana. And we all know Adelaide Bird scores cards. So, that being said, I thought Yasmin Lucindo was doing a good job. Actually won out the first round via the end of the round. Flurried toward the end and won the last minute and a half. And then in the second round, Lucindo continued to show the dominance, got the takedown, and worked her way to the arm triangle to eventually get the tap from Viana. Really, really, really nice work from Lucindo, and I think Lucindo has a nice little future built up for herself here. 15-5 now. 21 years old, though, is why the future looks so bright for Yasmin Lucindo. She has the loss to Yoregi, but has the win over Brogan Walker, and now the win over Viana, her first finish in the UFC. That's got to feel good for her. And yeah, you know, she's in a division, women's strawweight, that needs the life at the back end. That division, believe it or not, is getting older. A lot of these women's divisions are getting older. They need to have breakthrough women's stars. I'm very hopeful that happens. I think that's kind of a big alarming problem on the horizon, is the lack of women's stars in mixed martial arts. There's really very few girls that capture audiences. And I would say Zhang Weili is one of those girls. Shout out to her. Of course, Shevchenko, but not the belt holder. Grasso beats her again. Perhaps she can steal that shine, that feel. I don't know if it works that way, especially at women's. But we'll keep it pushing. The next guy deserves a little bit of shine and a discussion of his beef and how funny I think it is. And the fact that maybe he would win that fight, probably would win that fight. But this fight is a light heavyweight. It's Khalil Roundtree Jr. versus Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus making his debut at light heavyweight. Looks good. This is the way he should fight at. He's a plus 145 dog, so they're not giving him an easy debut. UFC's kind of fucked for this. Khalil Roundtree minus 170. I just want to point out Dox's last 4 fights. It's just like Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, Jair Rosenstrike, and Khalil Roundtree. It's just like, damn, man. Like, you just want this guy to get beat up? Because before the Derek Lewis fight, he's 12-3. Coming into this fight, he's 12-6. Coming off 3 KO losses. And granted, those are all heavyweight, so you could argue like, well, he doesn't have a chin for heavyweight power. Well, Khalil Roundtree is pretty much a heavyweight that cuts to 205 consistently and is shredded, like has the muscle of a heavyweight because he used to be huge. So, yeah, exactly what the fuck you think happens. Khalil Roundtree rocks the fuck out of Dawkins with a massive piss missile down the middle. Just one shot. Fucking see you later. And then Roundtree, here's my problem with Khalil Roundtree is, I might be a Sean Strickland mark. Call me a Sean Strickland mark. And also, just back to Dawkins, I think he deserves another shot in. God, I mean, goddamn UFC, will you please give him someone that just doesn't have nuclear fucking hands? I mean, Jesus Christ, this poor man's fucking life. Like, why do you? It's insane. It's insane. Anyway, but on the Khalil Roundtree tip, he has a beef with Sean Strickland. Now, call me a Sean Strickland mark, but I think that Khalil Roundtree is a weirdo fake guy. So, and Sean Strickland is completely like just real unabashed idiot. So, I'm here. Well, I know Sean Strickland's a middleweight, and here's what I'm saying is I'm here for the gym scrap, but I honestly think Khalil Roundtree is a lot bigger. So, and sorry, I had to respond to a text, everyone, if you're wondering what happened there. So I don't know what's next for Khalil Roundtree though. I think definitely he is. He's calling for someone ranked above him. I believe top 10 is what he had said. Let's see the weight class here. Yeah, so essentially called for a top 10. And he did get moved up to number 11. So if I'm the UFC, Johnny Walker's booked. Yeah, I mean, you could talk about Roundtree Ozdemir. Roundtree Ozdemir, I think, makes a lot of sense. Anthony Smith is booked. Nikita Krylov could be an interesting one there as well. Those are your only options, I believe, those Krylov or Ozdemir, if you want to give Roundtree his props there. But that being said, would much rather see the gym scrap between him and Sean Strickland. I think that would be hilarious. And then we can keep it pushing. I mean, co-main event time right now. You could argue Khalil Roundtree and Chris Dawkins could have been the co-main event, and this could have been the fight where they were. This is featherweights. Cub Swanson, the legend, Mr. Palm Springs, versus Mean Hakeem Dawodu. Mean Hakeem minus 320. Cub Swanson plus 250. Remember, these are all Caesars, not DraftKings. That being said, man, we got to talk about how you judge fights and the criteria by which they're judged. The only round that I scored here for Swanson was round 3. And I honestly, it could have been a sympathy round. Like when I really think about it. Because I had seen people scoring the fight 30-27 for Dawodu. No, I thought it was 29-28 Dawodu. And when we heard 29-28, all 3 judges, granted they get their different ways, Jacob Montalvo and Ron McCarthy. Now that's odd too. Ron McCarthy, judge I like a lot. Jacob Montalvo, ref, and usually good job at scoring fights relatively. I don't know what they were seeing. I don't know if they liked Cubs' power. But I thought Dawodu was doing more work. I thought he was getting more damage off for sure. I mean, more visible damage. I guess cage side, you could argue the punches were had a more or less of an impact standing next to him. So I don't know, man. This was a fucking robbery. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna roll out the hill. In fact, this was a robbery. This felt like a robbery because Dawodu could have had an argument for winning all three, and I know that means that Cub Swanson had an argument for all three. I think giving him round one is a little aggressive. Sal D'Amato gave Dawodu one. And then round two for Swanson, also aggressive, but Sal D'Amato gave him round two. Sal D'Amato was scoring the fight very odd all night, though. And then Montalvo McCarthy gave Dawodu the second. And I don't understand how you get the second and not the first. I felt like he was just as good in the first. Maybe Cub was a little... Maybe it wasn't what Dawodu was or wasn't doing. Maybe the judges were watching Cub because he's a veteran. And I know the judges sometimes can make that mistake. It's tough. It's tough, man. And even Cub Swanson was clapping when he heard the decision as though he thought Dawodu had won. Dawodu was extremely upset when the decision was read because he believed he had won. And Cub Swanson even admitted that he was surprised he'd won. And he also took the aside to say that it's hard to do this for him still. You know, he's getting up there in age and that he doesn't know how many more fights he has left. He's 29-13 now with that Fugues win. But he's going to turn 40 in 3 months. 2.5. So for me, if I'm Cub Swanson, I don't think he's fighting for money. I know he does the fins and feathers game or something of the nature like that. Out there off the coast in Cali. So, you know, if I'm Cub Swanson, maybe God though, he's 3-5 or 3-2 in his last 5. It's hard to tell him to retire. But if the UFC would give him, you know, more killer-ish fighters, he would obviously not be having that success rate, I wouldn't think. That being said, maybe give him a nice little send-off. I think maybe he's starting to even get there emotionally, physically, mentally. I mean, man, 42 professional fights. What else you got left to prove, you know? Yeah, the belt's out of reach. You're never going to get there again. And I think that is a perfect segue into our main event, which is, is a welterweight fight between Rafael Dos Anjos and Vicente Luque. Dos Anjos moving up to welterweight, though he is ranked number 10 at lightweight. I don't know why he does this. He kind of jumps back and forth. And I think this was like a lateral move for him, honestly, because Luque is ranked number 10 in welterweight. So the whole time I'm thinking, well, are you just trying to pretty much prove that you can be number 10 in each weight class, that you're like the gatekeeper that deserves to stay to keep gates, or how's that work? And then for Luque, he is coming off the horrible KO to Jeff Neal. Horrible KO. That was back in August 6th of 2022, after he had lost that 5-round fight to Bilal Muhammad, where he got pretty beat up too. So it's been a tough little skid for Luque. And granted, those are two really tough fights, and Jeff Neal had really tuned it up, and I mean was coming just with some demons in that fight, and honestly beat the hell out of Luque. And he was talking about how it took him a long in the build up to this fight, a long time to recover and clear concussion protocols, and he was getting scared that he might not be able to fight again. And I think there's bigger stories at play here than the fight. Granted, the fight is good. I will go round by round in the main event. But like I said, I think there's bigger stories here, right? And I think the big story for Luque is coming back from that, I mean, semi-traumatic brain injury, you could argue, if he couldn't clear concussion protocols and concussion tests, couldn't pass those for an extended period of time, that's got to be super alarming. I mean, especially whenever you're maybe waking up in a fog every morning, if that's one of your symptoms. You know, you have these little offshoot symptoms. And then for RDA, talked about the lateral move, but I think what I want to touch on more than that is that he made the point in his lead up that he thinks he has one more title run left in him. I believe he's 39 years old. He's 32-14 coming into this fight. His fight history is full of more killers than anyone I've ever seen in my life. Let me just run you some of these names real fast. I'm just gonna run the name of just big names, okay? If I could pronounce some of these Asian ones back in Pancrase in the day. All right, Jeremy Stevens. We got Terry Adam, Clay Guida, Gleason Tebow. Evan Dunham was a monster back in the day. I mean, people forget. Donald Cerrone in 2013. Fought Habib in 2014 to a decision, no less. Did not get finished in 3 rounds by Habib. 2014, though, and that was RDA. Like, it was RDA. I mean, 9 years ago, he was 30 years old. That might have been close to prime RDA, and you're talking about Habib winning back then. Habib was truly a monster. Has a win over Benson Henderson, has a win over Nate Diaz, has a win over Anthony Pettis, has another win over Donald Cerrone, lost to Eddie Alvarez, lost to Tony Ferguson. That was in Tony's fucking Gnarls Barkley streak. And all those fights I just named between Tony and Habib happened in a 2.5-year window, so keep that in mind. Tarek Safadine, Neil Magny, Robbie Lawler, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, Kevin Lee, Leon Edwards, Member Chiesa, Paul Felder. Tell me when I didn't hit someone ranked right there. That's a crazy run. I mean, wins over Magny, Lawler, Lee, Felder in a split, which I disagreed with. Though I think Felder has admittedly said RDA beat him. And then has a win over Moicano in 2022, which is pretty nice. Actually, aged well. It was Moicano Dos Anjos main event, I do believe. It was 5 rounds, so I don't know how that went 5 rounds. It's very strange. And then you had Dos Anjos Fiziev, or Fiziev stopped him in the 5th round. More so could have been a 4th round stoppage, I think. Then you had him beat Barberena later that year, and then took off 8 months, and then has this fight against Luque. So for me, it's not really the run of a title contender, you know. And it felt like a lateral move to go to welterweight because you'd still be number 10, and I think the road in welterweight is equally hard, especially if you're going to say in fighter meetings that, yeah, when I go to 170, I go for takedowns and I instantly feel the size disadvantage. Well, that means you're probably realistically at 155, and then if you're saying the weight cut's too much, well, you're 39, so that could be a big part of that. The other part of that, though, is that maybe he's a 160. You know, maybe that's his ideal weight. 160, like Habib. Maybe 160 is your actual weight, but there's just not a class for it. So, fucking sorry about it. Here we are. Rules is the rules. Didn't you know? I didn't make them. That being said, this fight, I mean, I think there's ways you could score there's ways you could score it. I think RDA wins the first round. Now, granted, Saul D'Amato disagrees and has it 48-47 for Luque, meaning if he did say go with me on round one, that he would have RDA winning this fight, which makes it sound like a way closer fight. That being said, 2 judges give round 1 to RDA, which I think is fully fair. And then I think round 2 is a clear Luque round. So I have it 19-19 after 2. 2 judges have it 19-19. 1 judge has it 20-18 Luque, which is Saul D'Amato here. Now the last 3 rounds shouldn't be that controversial, but somehow they are because no one judge scores them the same. I'm with Ron McCarthy here. I have rounds 3 through 5 scored to Luque. I thought he did just enough in 5, and I thought 3 was the only round that you could have argued to Dos Anjos. Out of 2 through 5, 3 was the only one where I thought Dos Anjos had a good argument for the round. Yeah, because I think 5 he has an argument, it's not good. And I think 3 has an argument, it's good, but I didn't score it for him live. Now, that being said, Junichiro Kamijo has round 3 to RDA as well as round 1. And 2 and 4 to Luque, giving her 48-48 going into the 5th round. And the 5th round was still reasonably close. So, it seems like a toss-up fight there, whereas Ron McCarthy at that point has it 39-37 going into the final round. So RDA needs a 10-8 or a finish to tie or win. And then you have Saul D'Amato, who has RDA down 39-37 by winning only the 3rd round thus far. And if he won the 3rd, I don't know how he didn't win the 1st. But then he gives him the 5th. So he ends up scoring at 48-47 for Luque. Junichiro Kamijo scores at 48-47 for Luque, albeit by a different way. And Ron McCarthy scores at 49-46 for Luque. So we end up with a unanimous decision for Luque. I scored the same way as Ron McCarthy, but this could have got squirrely. I mean, we were very close to seeing a split for RDA. Very close to, probably a split loss, but I can't imagine what would happen to Luque losing this fight whenever it's a clear dub for him. That would be such a robbery. Such an absolute robbery. Kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, this main event, if I'm being honest. Wasn't my favorite. It felt like a big look ahead. It felt like a lot of filler. And maybe that could be me looking ahead, right? This weekend we have, and I don't mean the Contender Series for anyone that wants to, oh, he's looking ahead to the Contender Series. What an idiot. That's not what I even meant. Like, you know what I meant. So let's see. We have Sterling O'Malley, UFC 292 this weekend. Early prelims kicking off at 5:30 Central, 3:30 West Coast. You got the main card pay-per-view at 7 West Coast, 9 Central. Prelims at 5 West Coast, 7 Central. And we got Aljamain and O'Malley in the main event. Zhang Weili and Amanda Lemos in the co-main. Neil Magnini and Gary in the featured. And then, actually, Damon Blackshear are going to step back in here against Mario Batista. I mean, what an absolute dog to step back in. And then you got Chito Vera, Pedro Munoz rounding out the pay-per-view. And we also have the Ultimate Fighter finale between Cody Gibson and Brett Katona, Kurt Hollabaugh, Austin Hubbard. And you also have RoboCop Rodriguez, and Chris Weidman makes his return against Brad Tavares. Got some good women's fights on the early prelims, and Petrosky and Meerschaert. Meerschaert making his 52nd professional fight. Simply too many. And for those of you that have rode with me throughout the entirety of this podcast, I thank you. That is going to wrap up all 13 UFC fights. That was UFC Fight Night. Luque versus Dos Anjos. Dos Nachos versus Lugie. That wasn't a good one. Anyway, please don't forget, like, subscribe, comment. If you hated this episode, please tell us. If you loved it, I probably won't do it again. It takes a lot of energy and concentration, and damn, I never realized talking for a podcast just without anyone else to kind of have that back and forth with. Granted, I am good at talking to myself. I do like to rant, but ranting for a long time can be tough. I give a big shout out to Chael for not usually sounding way too stupid whenever he does his. Brendan, sorry, most hated man on the internet for a reason, right? That being said, comment, like, subscribe, repost this, share this, go on YouTube, find us, put us in other people's homes. We love you guys. Don't forget to wish Dom and his wife a happy anniversary. And yeah, I know this episode only came in about an hour, and I hit all 13, but it's just so crazy. There's no one to ping pong with, so yeah, we will catch you guys potentially tomorrow night to Friday night for a little UFC 292 breakdown preview, betting tips, look ahead, whatever you want to call it, and wedding anniversary recap. So yeah, we will see you guys then. Until then, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys so much. For the Beefy Boys, for Beefy Boys Breakdown, at Beefy Breakdown on Twitter. I'm at Harrison_Madden, and at Dreadful Talk Dom. Yeah, hit us up, let us know, and we will see you guys very soon for hopefully a preview and breakdown. And if it's not a preview, then of course a breakdown, because we don't miss a week. Even this week, even though it came